First of all, I want to tell you how grateful I am to be invited here. I always bring my sidekick. Perfectionism is an illusion, and those who seek perfection will find themselves unfulfilled their whole lives. Anybody out there feel unfulfilled? It's pretty scary. We come to you from a company called RK General Consultants. That's our company. And we deal with a lot of people who want to be perfect. I love my job, it's fun.
Sometimes it's not that much fun, though, when you run into people who have unrealistic goals or have set unrealistic goals for themselves. Anybody here want to run a marathon, like with the Des News Marathon, or one of the upcoming marathons? And how are you coming on that training process?
Haven't started.
Yeah, me too. I've been meaning to do it for the last 15 years, and every year it rolls around. Yeah. Anyway, so my desire to run the marathon is to run it in 2.5 hours. Anybody else feel that might be just a touch on the unrealistic side? Yeah, all these gray hairs are well earned. I've set a ton of goals for myself that are unrealistic and not made them. And every time I do that, and apparently I don't learn very well, every time I do that, I'm sadly dismayed. And then, what happens? Well, what happens to you when you set yourself an unrealistic goal and you don't make it?
Frustrated.
Frustrated. Judgmental. Anybody beat themselves up? I could have done that. I should have done that. I should have made it to that finish line. Yeah, we're the best people for self-flagellation of anybody I've ever met. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background about me, I'm not native to this country. I was born in Denmark, although my dad and mom were both American citizens. Emigrated here when I was 1, so do I remember anything about Denmark? Yeah, not much. Grew up in a small farming community in Washington State. I have 4 master's degrees, not to impress you, but because I was stupid. I love school.
Had nothing to do with perfectionism.
Yeah. This is true. Well, it's, you get 1 master's degree and then you think, well, why can't I do that? I really want the doctorate, but I could get the master's degree. The first one was easy. So, yeah. So that therein is the problem, because when we set ourselves unrealistic goals and we don't meet them, we feel shame. Not guilt. Guilt is a healthy reaction. But we feel shame. We're ashamed of ourselves for not achieving the goal. We didn't quite get to the top. We didn't quite get that agent. We didn't quite make it to that movie that we knew was perfect for us. That was my other previous career, was a professional actor director.
Perfectionism is just an excuse for self-criticism. We see ourselves, I believe, from my experience, is that people become perfectionists because if we look at Erik Erikson's developmental theories, the first 4 build a foundation for who we're going to be. Let's talk about autonomy versus shame. Again, we have that shame word. Autonomy versus shame happens in the preschool years. And this is when you have this little child who goes, I'm thirsty, so they get the cup out of the cupboard and put it on the floor, and they get the gallon of milk, of course it's a full gallon, and they pour themselves a glass of milk, and this much is in the cup, and the rest is all over the floor, because they can do it themselves. Now the parent's reaction to that is what creates that shame. I'll take 2 different families. The first family, the parent's reaction was, wow, Charlie, you poured your own glass of milk. Do you want a snack with that? He sits down and has this snack and his milk, and he has a big smile on his face, And Charlie says, I think we need to clean it up, Mama. Well, how do you think we should do that, Charlie? I'll go get my towel. So he soaks up the milk with his towel, and she says, Charlie, do you think the floor needs to be mopped? Yeah, can I mop the floor? Yeah, you're doing so good. So Charlie mops the floor, and at nap time, Karen really cleaned it good. Let's take the other parent. Other parent is Heidi. She has little Danny, little girl. She comes walking into the kitchen. Danny Gibson, you little bitch. Get to your room. Which child has a shame? Which child is going to go out and try things for the first time every time? Because it's okay to make mistakes. And then we have the next phase of Erickson, which is, if I'm not mistaken, I have to think for a minute, it's where we learn that we can do things. We learn to be, no, that was the one I just did. What's the next one? Help me remember. I always have to cheat.
Me too.
The next one is where the kids learn to do things on their own on a secondary level. They can put their coats on. They can tie their shoes. They can, so Karen would say, Charlie, it's time to go. Okay, Mom. And he grabs his shoes and he puts them on and he says, look, I got ready all by myself. There's no guilt there. It's, ha, look at me. I can do everything. And then there's Danny. Danny, just give me your shoes. You're too damn slow. I'm going to put them on. And again, she feels broken. She feels inadequate. Who do you think is going to be the perfectionist? Danny. And if she can't do something the first time, guess what happens? She quits. She doesn't like herself very much. And she quits. So, she has these great big high standards. Why does she have those great big high standards for an 8-year-old now? She's 8. She has these great big high standards. She's in gymnastics. I can talk about these kids, they're my grandchildren. She's in gymnastics and she's 8 years old and can do a round off on the balance beam. It just comes to her. It just comes to her. I'll tell you another child who is now 31. This is my child, my middle child. Wouldn't it be nice if the children came with an instruction manual and we could be perfect parents? I looked to one, had 5 kids, not once in the placenta was an instruction manual. So let's talk about Laura for a minute. Laura was 3 years old. She wanted to go to preschool. I signed her up in preschool. She comes home and she says, Mom, you gotta come and see this, you gotta come and see this. So I go back to the school to see what it was, and it was a violin. And I says, yeah, honey, that's really pretty. I'm gonna play this someday. And I'm going, oh, please, no. That nasty little E string that's so high just drives me nuts. So she went out at 3 years old without my knowledge and put flyers on everybody's door saying that she will work in your yard, she will clean your toilet, she will do your dishes. When she was 6, she had $3,000 saved up in bottles that I didn't know about. She was all grown up, or at least she thought. And we told her, or I told her, you are the best violinist I've ever heard. I never told her how she could improve. I told her that she was always a good student in school, and I never told her how she could improve. So when she reaches 17 and school gets really hard, because she's kind of a book nerd, she gets carpal tunnel in her arm and can't play the violin anymore, and she has to take some science classes, and she thought that would be really fun. And she felt flat on her face, never learned to study. But Mommy told me, you told me I was the best. That was my bad. She was a perfectionism and she stopped. She stopped for about 4 years. Graduated from high school and she stopped. So as parents, teachers, leaders, we need to make sure that we tell kids that they do a good job. But we also tell them ways to improve because nobody's perfect.
When you set a goal and you make the goal for yourself, how do you feel? You're kind of ambivalent. Why are you ambivalent when you make the goal?
Because I don't make goals often. I try to avoid them so as not to disappoint myself.
Oh, I like that honesty. I wish a lot of our clients would do that. Anybody else? What else do you do? When you set a goal and you make the goal, or you fall just that little bit short of it, what happens? Louder.
You keep going to, I don't know, you've got some other goal coming up, probably. I got something else I want to do next.
We oftentimes pursue excellence without really knowing what we're doing. But if we plan for it, pursuing excellence is a healthy reaction to wanting to get to a stage. But if we don't get there and we beat ourselves up, then we look at that pursuit of excellence as a phenomenal waste of time. I've just wasted 5 years of my life on this. Anybody else felt that? I did.
How many of you have watched Big Bang Theory lately?
Yeah, lately.
Oh, thank you.
So this new season, we have Sheldon and Amy got married. And they came up with the perfect paper, the perfect theory. And they were getting all done, and they asked Sheldon and Leonard, or Leonard and Rajesh, to find different references for their paper. And as they were looking for references, they found that the paper and everything was proven in someone else's study. And they told them this, and they were crushed. They thought they had wasted all of their time. It was so funny. I should have put it up.
That would have been a good video.
It was.
I remember that.
It was good.
The interesting thing, however, is that when someone is validated for making an effort, you get a sense of, well, psychologically, you get a dopamine response. You get a very positive sense about yourself. One of the big criticisms of our system today is that every child who goes out to play soccer, whether bad or good, gets a trophy. They don't get a trophy for being in first place, and it's not noted to them that they get a trophy for being a participant and sticking it out. So, since we're bringing up family members, I have my youngest son, at the age of 14, was on the junior Olympic team for speed skating. I don't know if you remember when the Kearns Oval was built, but he was there when that was being built, and he and 50 other kids were skating around the oval, and Grisby, the hockey mascot, I think, dresses like a bear, got out on the ice because he was going to be the official opener of the skating rink. And the kids were out on the far end, and you could see them clustered together. You ever notice when adolescents get together, there's something brewing? So you could see them when they were looking over at Grisby. They all looked over and started laughing, and then they started speeding up around the base of the oval, and they all came flying past him as fast as they could skate. Now, these are some of the best skaters in the world, or at least in Utah. And he was among them. He actually led the pack out. And they got around, and they got to the other side, and they watched him and saw Grisby fall over, and they were all giggling and laughing and having a grand time and jumping up and down on their skates. Now, I tried to do that. I'd have broken ankles, feet, knees, and all those other things. But these kids were remarkably physically adapted to the ice. I got approached by his coach later that spring, who said, I want to take him to Europe this year. And I said, okay, why? And he said, because I think he's probably the fastest sprinter in his age group. And I said, okay. So I'm going to push him a little bit harder, the coach says. Now you have to understand, this coach was from Russia. They don't believe in not beating kids when kids misbehave or when kids are acting out. And when a kid doesn't have motivation, you've heard the phrase, the beatings will stop at sunset. They don't stop at sunset. So my son came home one day and he says, I'm not going back. And I said, why is that? You have a prime opportunity. You could be one of the next US Olympians. And he says, I don't care. I don't want to go back. what came out was the coach bullied him, and he was not used to that behavior. He was not, I don't know, tough enough is the word that comes to mind, but it's not the appropriate word, at least not for me. Over the years, I've seen that kind of behavior in both him and other teenagers. As they grow, when they meet things that are just one step too hard, they stop trying. Because the goal for them, in their view, is too high for them and they will be unsuccessful. And they always want to feel successful. That's us. If we set goals that are too hard for us to achieve, we stop trying.
How are you a perfectionist? I pick on somebody. Yelling. Stand up. How are you a perfectionist? Yeah.
And pretty much everything we do has to be perfect.
How does that affect you?
I never feel good enough.
Ooh. Never feel good enough. So a lot of shame.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm done. Okay. Take it on. How do you feel like you're a perfectionist?
I feel like I'm a very perfectionist.
Right there with you.
I spent 3 decades Mormon, and I took the PE there for perfect to heart. I was never good enough because good enough meant perfect. I'm not worthy of love unless I'm perfect. All of those apply to me. I remember the day I told myself I would no longer edit videos for people because I could do it, but it was not my primary skill set. And every time I took on a project, I would stress out, not finish it, drop the ball, and feel tons of shame. And then I eventually went, this is not something I can sort of do, but it's not something that's worth all this time and effort to perfect a skill that I don't care about.
Good. What else? What else have you dropped? For your own sanity.
I tell myself, don't shit all over yourself.
There you go. There it is. Should, ought to, need to, have to, must.
There is no should anymore.
You will
Good.
take those
But
words out of
you
your
know what?
vocabulary.
You know what though? No, they need to be there. And I'll tell you why. We have to have balance. You should pay your house payment or you should pay your rent, right?
Right.
Okay, so we have balance. So what's on the other side? What's on the other side of the shoulds? What's that?
Get to.
Want to, get to. Because
Choose to.
I choose to. Exactly. Because we have balance. If we don't have that balance, then everything becomes a chore. Everything becomes a stress maker, a trigger. Everything does. So, I was going to school. I'm a late bloomer. When I first got out of high school, I went into medical. I got an LPN. I hated that so bad. The only reason my dad paid for it is so I could take care of my mom, who was quadriplegic, and I really didn't want to watch my mom die. It just didn't sound very good. And so I went into accounting. And while I was doing accounting, I took a second in medical management. It was all right. And then I decided to have kids, 10 of them. I had 5 of my own, and then I had fosters. And how many parents are embarrassed by their children? Come on, let's be honest. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you get wiped in school, what are they going to think about me? I can't ever appear back at that school again. Ever feel that way? Yeah. Stop being a perfectionist, Shelly. At work, we become perfectionists. I became such a perfectionist at work, doing medical billing and coding, that I got told everywhere I went that I did the work for 2 people. That when they replaced me, they had to hire 2 full-time and 1 part-time to do the same amount of work that I was doing. Now, I would get there at 7, clock in at 8, and leave around 7 or 8 after I clocked out for my 5 hours, because we weren't allowed to work. But I got my job done. How about relationships? Who's a perfectionist in relationships? Tell us how you're a perfectionist in relationships. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is more true of me, like, when I was younger, I would, like, just, I don't know the word is for.
Did you fantasize about what the relationship could be like?
Yes, like friendships, mostly.
Yeah. And when they weren't that way, what happened?
It was, like, horrible, and then, like, once I let go of that, my friendships were it's like, they were a certain way I thought they were gonna, like, I was like, we were gonna be close friends, and like, accept each other completely, and yada yada, and like, I wanted them to be a certain way, and that was perfectionism, and that ended up hurting their feelings.
It hurts everybody. When you have a person who is this shape, and you want them to fit in this shape, they're not going to fit, are they? No. And then it destroys you and them. Parents do that to their kids. They have this shape that they want their kids to fit in, and what does that do to their self-esteem? That child either becomes broken and depressed, or that child becomes a perfectionist. I have to do this. But if as parents, we give those 6 pieces of attachment, which has appropriate physical touch, unconditional love, radical acceptance, safety, security, and play, our kids are going to have internal validation right here, and internal boundaries that are healthy, and nothing is going to break through, and they're going to have a really good, successful self-esteem. How about eating? Weight and our shape. Had a little kid come up to me, 6-year-old little girl. The first thing she said to me is she says, "Ooh, you're really fat." I said, "I'm not fat, this is my food, baby." And she says, Mom, Becca has a food baby." Mom laughed, but now she just walks up to people and says, "You have a food baby." So, I guess she doesn't call them fat anymore. What do we teach? How do we teach our kids? When my oldest child was in 2nd grade, he had a very obese teacher. I mean, this teacher needed 2 piano benches and a chair on each side to sit down to the piano and hold her. She was huge. And Joshua walks up to her, and he looks, and he walks around her this way, and he looks, very perplexed, and he walked around her this way, and he looked very perplexed, and he says to her, "How do you fit that many babies in there?" This woman was about 62. She didn't like him very much after that. She took it very personally. Why did she take it personally? She had shape, because she had the shape that she expected herself to fit in, and she didn't, and she couldn't give herself that radical acceptance.
She was on a 6 or however that kid was to affect her.
Yeah, he was 7. And because it affected her, because she couldn't control herself, her choices were impulsive, her reactions were based on really big emotion, and her attitude was based on resentment and anger. And she ended up losing her job, and this close to losing her retirement that she worked for 30 years, because she slapped my child with those big emotions. And I'm probably pretty sure he deserved it, but not by the teacher.
No.
Grooming. Have you ever known somebody to spend 3 hours in the bathroom and they're still not perfect? There's a lot of things. We're out of time, been told. If anybody wants a copy of this, we have The Cycle of Perfectionism, We have, am I a perfectionist quiz? And we have this last quote, understanding the difference between healthy striving and perfectionism is critical to laying down the shield and picking up your life. Research shows that perfectionism hampers success. In fact, it's often the path to depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis. Questions? Go for it.
What can you do, like, in your opinion, in your, like, you know, study, what can you do better to, like, get over perfectionism or start, like, that process? What are some things you can try?
It all starts with your thoughts. What are my thoughts? Because we have this triangle of life, and we have our thoughts on one side, our feeling or emotion on the other, and our behavior on the bottom. If we can not control, but keep balance our thoughts. For instance, when that little girl says, you're fat, my first thought was, yeah, I'm fat. But then I balanced it out. I'm really not that fat. I have a sister who's a lot fatter. Make me feel good. So we have to find balance in our thoughts. That's the first way. I apologize for being late. I was at the hospital with a 15-year-old sitting on my table. I have all kinds of things to bring, and I forgot them. I had the handouts. I created a handout out of the PowerPoint for everybody with my business cards. If you guys will sign up, Shelley, will you have everybody who wants this information sign up with their email and their name, and I will get it all out to them?
Sure.
And if you guys want some help getting started with this, I can see you. I don't take insurances right now, but I typically charge $50 an hour, but I will see you for $40 an hour if you want. My office is out in American Fort. We do Saturdays a lot. So if you'd like a Saturday appointment. Any other questions?
So the business you're in is a counseling business?
Yes.
Okay. And what were your 4 master's degrees? I'm curious.
Oh goodness, you're gonna make me remember them all.
Theater.
Theater was the first one.
Educational leadership.
Yeah. Administration and policy, math.
Educational specialties.
Yeah. Gifted and talented, and then my MS in counseling.
Wow.
I just want my doctorate. Go ahead.
So you talked about the difference between guilt and shame, and how guilt is a maybe healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like
guilt is a healthy
when-
expression.
When you're a little child and your mom says, don't do that, you learn that that's a wrong thing. So when you do it again, you get in mom's purse and get a mint, you're gonna feel guilty.
So is guilt, let's see, so is shame a top behavior?
And shame is you are bad. Instead of I did something bad, I am bad. I am bad. I am lazy. I am irresponsible instead of I did something that was irresponsible.
Shame is an outgrowth of perfectionism. If you don't make a goal, you feel ashamed of yourself because you didn't get something that everybody else told you should be able to achieve. Which is why I say take should out of your vocabulary. It's got a place in it, but not as it applies to you as an individual.
Anybody else? Yes.
Wondering if, like, guilt can be changed into, like, more, like, maybe apprehension or awareness of something actually. Because I feel like that gives you more power rather than the guilt kind of has, like, this heaviness to it.
Right.
Emotionally and energetically, it's like guilt just has, like, a lot of ties to it.
Well, only
awareness.
only if you give it that. Awareness is good, but guilt is natural.
Guilt is, yeah.
Guilt is natural.
Doing something
And we enmesh guilt and shame, and we don't separate them. And that's when it becomes so heavy. Yes, sir.
I volunteered at Halfway House in Salt Lake City, and I asked women last week, what are your biggest concerns? They said they're all afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And most of them were addicted to drugs, they go to jail for it, so they made some major mistakes in their lives. And I tell them, I make mistakes all the time, I have no problem making mistakes, so how can someone transform if they're paralyzed by fear of making mistakes, or they do stuff so much because of mistakes? I don't get upset by mistakes. I learn from them for the most part. I mean, I have my moments. So, how do you go from, like I said, toxic attitude towards mistakes to a more healthy relationship with mistakes?
It all comes down to your self-esteem. It all comes down to those first 4 levels of Erik Erikson's developmental, because something happened on those first levels that messes up a kid's life. I'll give you a for instance on that. I have a 22-year-old that I'm working with. When she was born, she was in ICU for the first 6 months of her life, and her mom was in the washroom. She wasn't held or coddled. She would cry and cry and cry in that little incubator. And guess what? She didn't trust. In that first 18 months of life, that's when we learn to trust or not to trust. And we don't even trust ourselves. So we went through that. We had therapy sessions where I could just hold her. I could put my arm around her. We could read and work on things, but I was always having some kind of contact, hugging her, holding her hand. And after 6 weeks of that therapy, we moved to the second phase. Because if you miss something in the first phase, then all the other phases need to be addressed. But that's why. Anybody else?
So just to come back to something that you said, with criminal thinking comes this attitude that the world is not fair, everything is set against you, and because you are adjudged a criminal, you're already facing an entire uphill climb for the rest of your life. When I was working at an addiction facility in Salt Lake that dealt specifically with federal criminals, one of the things we talked about in group is, what are you grateful for? Okay, so you made this mistake, so you burned your business down. What came out of it? What was the good thing that came out of it? And I refused to allow them to dwell on all of the bad stuff that happened, because there's always a flower that's going to come up through the cracks of the cement, and that's the part we have to turn them to and let them focus on that.
So I should ask then, what did us come up with drug addiction over the time in prison?
Yeah, what did you get out of
What's
this?
some lessons and positive things?
One of the big things that both of us do is we say, so we know what your reward was when you were going through that. What are you getting out of this? What did you learn from that mistake that you're carrying forward? And what that does is that places the mistake in the past and places a different slant, a different framework on the mistake proper. So now they're looking at it like, oh, that was just a mistake. What did I learn from that? And then they start thinking about, well, never to do that thing again. That changes the fabric of their thinking. But it's, especially with criminal thinking, from both of our experiences, it's, at best, it's difficult to overcome because you're climbing a mountain without the tools.
Yes.
Probably one more question.
Okay.
Last question?
Last question. Shoot.
Yeah, that's fine.